Starting our list off at number 10, the Pandora Papers. We'll kick this list off with one of the more recent leaks. This one happened back in October 2021, and it heavily involves the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Last year, they'd published the first leaks of what would end up being 12 million documents, all of which detail the dealings of some of the world's wealthiest individuals, which included political leaders as well. These papers revealed their secret offshore accounts that were being used in order to evade taxes. And the consortium has called their investigation the most expansive leak of tax haven files ever in history. It's like a weird flex, but okay. In order for this to come to fruition, they needed the involvement of more than 600 journalists from over 117 different countries. So yeah, a lot of people got on board to stop this. This leak is said to have made public all the ways in which politics, business, and real estate are all impacted by corruption. The leak went on to have quite an influence over the election in the Czech Republic, and it also left more people calling for the government to crack down on things like, money laundering and tax evasion, all those things that sound like they're from Ozark, and other sneaky ways that people have found to hide their wealth. Number 9, nuclear site list. Here on Bumblebee, we love lists. Not sure if you could tell, but yeah, you won't believe number 3. Apparently the US government also fancies a list or two. Who knew? Hit that thumbs up, by the way. Back when Obama was still running the game, a report was delivered to Congress. Well, it was supposed to be, rather. The 266-page report featuring, every nook and cranny about the US nuclear program, things we don't want to know. It was all released publicly onto the government printing office's website in draft form. Yeah, just a casual PDF that shows us maps to stockpiled fuel used for nuclear warheads back in the day. Those classic Google Sheets. How often does this happen? I thought this only happened in Mission Impossible movies. MIT professor John M. Judge said that these screw-ups do happen. It doesn't look like a serious breach. I mean, it certainly sounds serious, but okay, we'll just trust the government, I guess. Number 8, weaponized lightning. This whole time I thought Thor worked for the Avengers. Yeah, apparently he's working for the CIA. Who knew? Back in the late 60s, this scientist, who remains anonymous to this day, that's always a great sign, apparently they figured out how to weaponize and bottle lightning. That's insane. I still can't figure out how they put ships inside of bottles, let alone lightning. That's another thing I can't even imagine. They were determined to weaponize lightning. That way there's little to no evidence left over after this ideal attack. The idea, as crazy as it sounds, it kind of worked. I mean, it never made it to the final stages, thankfully, but when Forbes released these declassified CIA files, we got a better idea of what was going on in the sky at one point. The plan was to drop these extremely thin metal wires from planes. They would drop a metal fishing line through the clouds. Now, this sounds like a Looney Tunes cartoon heist. This sounds insane, but sending that many volts of electricity down to an enemy camp, that would for sure mess up their communications if it had worked. Number 7, sewer goddess. I love reading about ancient gods. It's my favorite topic. The Roman god of manure and fertilizer, for example. Where was that one in Hades? That would have been helpful. I would have beat that game in 8 minutes flat with him. The god of toilets. There's one we can't forget about either. Crepitus, okay? Every day we have to thank the god of toilets, right? If you haven't today, go ahead and thank them. The Romans regarded Glossina as the goddess of the main drain. The literal main drain to the city of Rome, all this water. This goddess was Glauca Maximum, aka Big Drain. Eventually, this god was affiliated with Venus, the goddess of beauty and love. Yeah, love me some big ass drains. Nice. That's a lie, actually. As a kid, I was so afraid of the bathtub drain. I would pull it and then just immediately high jump out of the tub. I don't want to get sucked down like Ant-Man. Know what I mean? Number 6, death before combat. With most of these Roman gladiators, they're trained, they understand a specific style of combat, and they're paired with an opponent that's somewhat equal. And then hundreds of people go, yeah, and they bet on you and then see blood and stuff. It's horrible. But not all these gladiators are UFC fighters, okay? Not all of them are Kurt Russell and handsome. No, a great amount of these gladiators were criminals who were forced to fight each other in the name of entertainment, or they were slaves. Yeah, these prisoners of war were not really on board with fighting a lion with a dagger, believe it or not. They understood this was a one-way trip most likely, so many of them took their own lives before the combat even begun. This one story is quite haunting, but it makes total sense, sadly. 29 prisoners, they were all set to fight these crazy animal battles in front of thousands, but they all strangled each other. They all took each other's lives with their bare hands because that was easier to them than walking into this nightmare publicly. That's horrible. The reason this was the easier choice to make, sadly, was because saying no to the combat or to the games would just lead to an even more painful public execution. So it's a lose-lose, sadly. They sucked. Number 5, loincloths. Going back to ancient Roman and Egyptian times, there we go, 2 for 1. The loincloth was of course used by all. Either that or you would just be naked. I found this neat step-by-step on how to make your own loincloth, and I tried it, and it's way more complicated than I could have ever imagined, okay? We don't have a lot of archaeological evidence because these linens barely made it through a decade, obviously. There's not a lot of bones in them that would hang out over these thousands of years. But ancient Romans would often use leather to make underwear. Can you imagine that? Hot goat skin wrapped around your waist in the sun? Oh, I need baby powder just thinking about it right now. We still use leather today when it comes to undergarments and, zippers and stuff, but that's for another video. We'll get to that another time. Number 4, cesspools. Hey, here's a note. If you're gonna make a massive castle, you need to know where not to build certain rooms, in case you're building a castle. Anyone watching? Like say over a cesspool, as an example. Yeah, don't build anything heavy over here, or else let's talk about it. Cesspools were often placed under floors, which makes sense because, gravity and life and stuff. But you need to make sure those floors are supportive enough, period. That's it. Or else, this will happen. Back in 1183, the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire had a dinner in the Palace of Erfurt. But in the main floor of the main hall broke open, resulting in a bunch of dinner guests falling through said floor, with even a few drowning again in said cesspool. Yeah, it's a horrible way to go. And then again, in 1326 in England, Richard the Raker had just sat down. The guy hasn't even started his meal yet, and then again the floor beneath him broke and he fell through and drowned in a cesspool. That's like the worst way to drown too. I'd say chamber pots were safer, but when it comes to waste, out of sight, out of mind. Sadly, just get that away from me. Just downhill, get it out, or else we'll drown in it, probably. Number 3, Prism. No, not that Katy Perry album. That's a different leak. Edward Snowden, we just talked about him. He leaked a few things, I've heard. One of which being a slideshow, believe it or not. It's not that crazy sounding, but it's loaded. This slideshow was used to help train intelligence personnel, and it detailed the United States and their involvement in a secret program called Prism. This program was the NSA's effort to collect data from internet companies. The data ranged from email content to search histories, to file transfers, all that jargon. The reason this PowerPoint was so important is because it confirmed that the NSA had access to the same servers of major US internet service providers like Google, Skype, Apple, or YouTube. I know. YouTube. Prism first began in 2007 with Microsoft and then expanded to Apple come 2012. Now, when it was all leaked, Snowden warned that the extent of this data collection was a lot greater than the public even knew, and that it included what he called dangerous and criminal activities. Thanks, Snowden. Number 2, God Save the Queen. This one's quite grim, but I have to talk about it, considering that this all happened in 2021. Yeah, dark. Back in 2021, Politico magazine accidentally released Operation London Bridge to the public. Now, this magazine somehow got documents showing each and every step in detail for when that fateful day should arrive. Again, this was 2021. They listed every grim detail that would have to happen. Customs require that the Prime Minister is informed by the monarch's private security. Flags will then fly at half-mast, of course, but oddly enough, in this document, the Queen's death is referred to as D-Day. 9 days of protocols would follow, including a service at St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, where of course Her Majesty will be buried alongside King George VI. Now, it's incredibly dark, but imagine reading about this one morning in 2021 in a magazine. That's so grim, just having your morning tea, reading about this, you're like, oh, cool, I didn't know they would do that first. Good night. And finally, number 1, Watergate. I have to finish on Watergate. It's a classic, right? It's perhaps one of the largest scandals in United States history. In the middle of 1972, there were 5 men who were arrested for breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel in Washington. It was clear they intended on bugging the place. It was fishy, right? As the year went on, the election came closer. All of a sudden, out of the woodwork comes this anonymous source who fed information to Washington Post reporters that the Watergate bugging incident was a massive campaign of political spying and sabotage, kicked off by President Nixon's re-election and directed by officials of the White House. Now, despite this information leak and it being reported in the news, Nixon was still re-elected, even though he was involved in all of this. These men were clearly linked to a fundraising group for Nixon, but his administration just kept denying any involvement. They just kept denying the whole thing. Now, it wasn't until later that year in 1972 when reporters Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward came forward and they just exposed everything. They exposed the whole truth. They exposed the administrator's role in this entire scandal. They had an inside source, they had an FBI agent named Mark Felt, everything. This ultimately left to Nixon resigning later on in 1974. He was the first president to ever resign, all because of some leaks. Gotta have some backup emails, some extra passwords.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have ambrosia. Said to be the drink of the Greek gods with a flavor of honey, this beverage was delivered to the Olympians by doves, and this is what gave them their immortality. This is an important substance in mythology that is seen many times. Sometimes in the stories, people were given the privilege of drinking it, like in the story of Heracles, but sometimes others would try to steal it, and like we learned before, do not anger the gods or else you'll find yourselves punished like Tantalus, forever trapped, hungry and thirsty, standing in a pool of water he can't drink, under fruit he can't eat. Some mortals in the stories were only teased with the possibility of immortality, just to be turned away at the last second, like the hero Tydeus. He was going to be made immortal by Athena the goddess, but then she caught him eating human brains, so she decided, probably better to not. Mythology is weird. I didn't make this up. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Holy Grail. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far. The Holy Grail is one of the most well-known pieces of Christian mythology. It is said to be the cup or bowl that Jesus drank out of during the Last Supper. Of course, people were trying to get their hands on this relic, and to make it even more revered, it is said to be the vessel in which Joseph caught his blood while he was on the cross. That's heavy stuff, and it's the reason why King Arthur and his knights traveled in search of the Holy Grail. Here's the catch with this thing though. Only the purest souls were able to grasp it, and not many of us can admit that we're the purest of souls. This is why when only one man was able to touch it, it is said that he gained immortality through it. If that was me, I'd tell him to prove it. I mean, real easy to say it when you're the only one who can touch it. Just saying, proof or it didn't happen. Legend says the guy's still eating Mr. Noodles out of it to this day. In our number 8 spot today, we have golden apples. We hear a lot about the golden apples in Greek mythology, but in Norse mythology, they're actually quite an important and often discussed item. The golden apples actually need to be continually eaten by the Norse gods in order to maintain their immortality. The apples also supplied the gods with their strengths as well as their forever youth. The orchard that contained these apples was looked over by the goddess of spring, Idun. The apples are extremely important to the mythology, and in one story, when the goddess gets tricked into giving herself and the apples over to Loki, the gods immediately grew old and weak, but luckily she was returned and everyone's youth was restored. This led people to search for these golden apples at one point, but even if you were to find one of these magic apples, you'd need a constant supply in order to maintain your immortality, and that might be a little bit more difficult than you think.
Number 7. The Shadow Brokers. Back in August 2016, a group named the Shadow Brokers were the talk of the town. What's going on here? The Shadow Brokers, apparently, they would steal cyber weapons from an NSA hacking unit, and then they would proceed to sell said weapons online to the highest bidder. Now, this sounds made up. This sounds like something from a Marvel Comics or a DC Comics book. This is crazy. Even the name, the Shadow Brokers, are you kidding me? These tools in question, these cyber weapons, have been used by many countries for a while. And many are not so great sounding, to be honest with you. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, these cyber attacks, they can happen anywhere at any time. The 2019 ransomware cyber attack, well, that was one example. This incident was directly connected to the Shadow Brokers. Whoever this mysterious group is, they still remain a mystery. The Shadow Brokers. Sounds like a real estate agent that doubles down as a wrestler. Number 6. Bird conspiracy. Okay, since there's a great amount of people online that believe that birds aren't real, like a lot of people, I figured I'd bring this one back up just to stress you out. Back in the early 60s, the CIA had this secret program called Project Aqualine, where they used these small drones, with a low radar cross-section, a little camera, all that spy stuff, and they would, spy on people. They would pretend that they were birds. They began working on it in 1965, and the first prototype, it was a bit obvious. It wasn't that spy at all, really. It weighed over 100 pounds. It was this massive, eagle-looking robot, but the only way to catch it after its flight was to fly it directly into a net, which broke something almost every test flight, so wasn't working out. Cut to 2022, there's for sure a drone pigeon out there somewhere, probably. I don't know. Olivia did a bunch of lists on hidden cameras. They found a hidden camera and a cactus, so we really never know. Sleep in fear. Birds aren't real. Number 5. More documents. Here we go. I mentioned earlier those offshore accounts for higher-ups. Well, a year later, after that 2016 scandal, just one more year later, even more documents were exposed. What? There's more? Who knew? Meaning even more secrets and even more names. Well, spill the tea. Who was it this time? Well, amongst the 13 million documents, Nike and Apple were the talk of the town. Yeah, they had around 250 billion out there hidden in offshore accounts. And on top of that, they were financial connections to the literal Queen of England. And also Justin Trudeau. Not as, fancy as the Queen. Everyone was so mad at Trudeau for going to his cottage over the pandemic. Meanwhile, he's dipping into offshore accounts at the same time. He's dipping his toes and he's dipping his nose. Number 4. Project Dishfire. It was reported by The Guardian that the NSA collects 200 million text messages a day from around the world at random. I bet 100 million of them say, "You up?" They then use these messages to pull the details of its user, be it their location information, contact networks, credit card details, all stuff you don't want out there. It was also reported that the NSA also provided British intelligence agencies with all of this data, just without the actual context of the text messages. Oh, good, that's fine, I guess. How bizarre is this? They have all this data, and at any point they could extract anything. Older purchases, past travel plans, financial transactions, contacts, photos. They can also take a peek into your personal information regardless of whether or not you are under investigation. Yeah, this sounds illegal, unethical, and quite shady, but it happens. This is one of the many leaks brought to light by, you guessed it, Edward Snowden. He's like the only guy when it comes to leaks, really. Him and whoever leaked the Spider-Man stuff. They're like the two hottest names right now.
In our number 3 spot today, we have Amrita. There is a collection of Vedic hymns called the Rig Veda, and according to these Hindu hymns, Amrita, which is sometimes called Soma, is a drink that can give someone immortality. Rig Veda 8:48-3 says, quote, "We have drunk Soma and become immortal. We have attained the light the gods discovered. Now what may foeman's malice do to harm us? What, O immortal, mortal man's deception?" While Amrita and its consumption by humans has been well documented throughout history, the knowledge of where to get it has been lost. It is believed to have been some sort of plant or fungus, and the instructions for the preparation of it involved things like pounding parts of the plant into paste or to release its juices. It would sometimes be filtered through wool and then mixed with cow's milk before being consumed. Amrita was often said to have been found in mountainous regions, but despite there being such detailed accounts of its use, the true identity of it has been lost, and now sometimes ritual prayers will include an apology to the gods for the lack of Amrita. In our number 2 spot today, we have eating a mermaid. This is definitely on the top of the list when it comes to the strange. In Japanese mythology, there is a mermaid creature known as a ningyo, which is described as a cross between a carp and a monkey. These creatures lived in the sea, and they usually brought bad luck and stormy weather with them, and if one washed up on shore, it was thought to be an omen of war. This leaves me wondering why anyone would ever want to be near one, but as legend has it, a girl known as the 800 Nun, one day her father accidentally brought her the meat of this creature, and she ate it and was cursed with immortality. It was called a curse because she was horribly sad for many years after having to watch many husbands and children of hers pass away, which, that would be an absolutely terrible part of immortality. After being horribly sad for many years, she decided to devote her life to Buddha and become a nun, and in the end, because of her holiness, she was allowed to pass away at the age of 800. I guess maybe immortality isn't as attractive as some of us once thought. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Philosopher's Stone. Turns out this thing wasn't just a Harry Potter relic, it was based on a real thing people believed could grant the power of immortality. It has long been believed that the Philosopher's Stone could be made out of ordinary substances that exist everywhere, but we just don't have the information needed in order to recognize them. This is why in the first Harry Potter movie, Voldemort is searching for the stone. He's trying to find a way to live again, and he thinks the stone is the key. It is thought that this may have been created by a man named Nicholas Flamel. Yes, we just talked about him. Yes, he is also a character in Harry Potter, and he was also a real person.
Number 10. The Rushmore Room. Built by Gutzon Borglum, 1925, this chamber behind Abraham Lincoln's third eye was meant to hold documents and artifacts most significant to what makes America, America. Yeah, not country music and muscle cars, of course, but like the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, the important stuff. At first, the idea was a huge inscription to be carved under the figures. It would describe the 9 most important events in US history from 1777 to 1906, basically Washington to Roosevelt. They realized it wouldn't be big enough to read, so they thought up this new plan: dig out a secret room within the mountain for the records to live. A list of famous Americans and contributions to the world of science, industry, and art, all in one spot. Unfortunately, Borglum passed away before it was completed, and World War II started, halting construction. The unfinished hall houses 16 panels within a teak wood box, within a titanium vault, within a granite casing. Of course, not accessible to the public. Yeah. Secret stuff. Vault within a vault type stuff, huh? Okay. Number 9. Eiffel's apartment. When Gustav Eiffel designed the tower, drawn into the plans, he included a very subtle, very private little apartment for himself at the very top. I mean, why not, right? Imagine that view. When he passed in 1923, he left the place in mint condition. All of his furnishings exactly where he left them. Today, the apartment houses only mannequins of Eiffel himself. He's just like washing the dishes, you know what I mean? He's just like... Apparently tons of people would offer up literally a small fortune to rent the private room for just a single night, but Eiffel always refused. Apparently only Thomas Edison was granted access for quote, logical thinking. Dude, this place is awesome. I wonder if he had bugs, you know? Like if it had an elevator, it had bugs. Hundo P. This place is also like 8 times bigger than every university house I lived in. Like look at that ceiling height. This place is beautiful. Number 8. Library apartments. If you've seen Good Will Hunting, you're gonna love this next one. Apparently there's more than just bookworms that live at the library. When libraries were built in New York more than a century ago, they needed people to take care of them. These buildings were often heated by coal. Library custodians, along with their families, used to live inside small hidden apartments located above, under, and behind lots of New York public libraries. Today, of course, these secret apartments are either remodeled into storage closets or offices. Dude, can you imagine? Libraries closed, just bored, wandering down to find a new book every day? Like you'd be a genius. That's like free school right there. I'd definitely be riding the trolleys all day long though, you know? Just like riding the ladders across the walls. There's only like a dozen of these secret libraries that still exist in New York. I'm surprised this isn't a Netflix or TLC series called I Grew Up in a Library.
In our number 7 spot today, we have the mushroom of immortality. As early as 475 BC, there are written records that reference the mushroom of immortality, which was a key ingredient in the elixir of life. The Lingzi, which is translated to mean supernatural mushroom, is the oldest known mushroom to be used medicinally, which is super cool. According to the Book of Han, people who were masters of esoterica, alchemists, and magicians known as the Fang Shi knew the secret locations on a mountain where these immortality mushrooms grew, but no one else did. This resulted in several Qin and Han emperors to send large expeditions to search for the mushrooms of immortality, but to no avail. While these mushrooms are still used in traditional Chinese medicine today, it doesn't seem as though anyone has been able to actually achieve immortality from them, but maybe we just don't have the correct recipe anymore. In our number 6 spot today, we have Nicholas Flamel. If you're a Harry Potter fan, you've definitely heard this name before, but did you know that the character is actually based off of a real person? Nicholas Flamel lived from 1330 to 1418, and he was a successful French bookseller. What's curious, however, is that about 200 years after his death, there began to be texts that surfaced that were attributed to him. According to these texts, Nicholas had learned secrets of alchemy from Jewish alchemists while traveling in Spain, and it is said that during this time that he acquired the original copy of the Book of Abramelin the Mage. It was then claimed that Nicholas was the one who held the elixir of life as well as the secrets of transmutation, and it was also claimed that he was probably still alive somewhere. Wild stories aside, what is in that book? Clearly people believe that there must be some immortality secrets hidden inside. In our number 5 spot today, we have anger a Greek god. Many people generally look on immortality as a good thing or as a positive. In fact, it's well documented throughout history of people trying to achieve immortality. But in the times of ancient Greece, it was sometimes given as a punishment. In Greek mythology, there are plenty of times where a god would get mad at a mortal and the punishment would grant them everlasting life, but that included a punishment that would literally never end. Like the perfect example is the mortal king, Sisyphus. He was always trying to be a smart aleck, and he would often attempt to barter with the gods rather than simply bow down to them, and at that point all the gods were super fed up with him. In the end, they eventually cursed him to live forever in Hades, where he has to continuously roll a boulder up a hill. Once at the top, the boulder rolls back down, and the process repeats. Legend has it that he is still pushing the boulder up that hill to this day. In our number 4 spot today, we have cinnabar. Cinnabar is the common ore of mercury, and it has a long history in ancient cultures, but of course, there's one big issue with it. It causes mercury poisoning. This is exactly why it's super strange that this is the central ingredient to the Taoist elixir of immortality. The elixir, which was called Huandon, or the reverted elixir, it was believed that certain materials such as cinnabar or gold, when ingested, would instill some of their qualities into the body and rid the body of any imperfections that caused mortality. facility. Of course, we now know that unfortunately, most of the precious items in this elixir were highly poisonous, and they ended up doing the exact opposite of what they were intended to do. Many people died, including Tang Dynasty emperors, and it is said that this is part of what caused the shift from trying to find outside substances to create immortality to finding a way to harness one's natural energy in order to gain immortality.
Number 3. Lake Erie. Lake Erie is harboring a huge ancient secret and has been for the past million years, which not a lot of people know about. I didn't even know about this until today. Something absolutely massive under the water was found, and it's not Bessie or those freshwater dinosaurs. It's salt. Yeah, lakes aren't salt water, Kyle. No, but they most certainly are. See, underneath Lake Erie is a highway-long salt mine, and I say highway-long because like you need to merge and like signal down there. It's so big. The Salina Formation is the source of rock salt beneath Cleveland. It's located at the bottom of a 1,500-foot thick section of limestone bordering 11 counties under Lake Erie. Every day, the 5-mile wide mine gets even bigger, football field by football field, as crew sticks explosives in the walls and blasts the salt loose. Dude, for real, I'm shook right now. Just think, next time you're fishing, just think at the bottom of that, yeah, there's trucks and a highway under there. Huh? Number 2, hotel tracks. Track 61 is an abandoned Metro North station located under the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. What makes this place spookier than New York City's other abandoned train stations is the fact that it's right under such a famous and bustling hotel you would never even know. Only accessible by one locked door on 49th Street and using private rusted elevators. Dude, I'm picturing the Batcave right now. Like, for real, right? I'm disappointed. Like, whoever owns this hotel, if you're not Batman right now, what a waste. Apparently President Roosevelt would even use this track back in the day for protection when visiting New York City during World War II. They built special elevators so that presidents could drive in and out with cars right up onto the train. Okay, again, we're sure Roosevelt wasn't Batman, right? Like, cause like this is the Batcave, right? And number 1, Drum Castle. In 2013, archaeologists came across something that people apparently have missed for like the last hundreds of years. A secret medieval chamber and bathroom under one of Europe's oldest castles. Drum Castle, Scotland. It lies in Aberdeen and was built in the 1200s. It was gifted to William de Irwine in 1325 by Robert the Bruce himself. While working on a conservation project for Scotland's oldest kept castle, a wee tiny room was found perfectly preserved, equipped with the original toilet seat and all. Dr. Jonathan Clark from the FAS Heritage led the excavation. Trapped for centuries, a secret medieval chamber. The archaeologists then also discovered a second hidden chamber in the same tower, which, legend says, is where Mary Irvine hid her brother for 3 years after defeat in Battle of Culloden. Yeah, English versus Scots. That was a scary time, you know? People getting stretched to death and stuff. Gross.
Number 10. Sacred books. The Romans paved the way for many following civilizations, okay? They invented surgical tools, they invented medicine on the battlefield, and before this era, literature took the form of a tablet or a scroll. The Romans, they created the codex. Pages stacked on top of one another, just bound pages. The reason you have homework right now to be doing instead of watching this. It's all thanks to the ancient Romans. The early codex was bound wax, and then it moved to animal skin. This was a big step because early Christians used this new invention to produce copies of the Bible. Important pieces of history, so rightfully so, they had to be locked away from the public. Now, back when King Tarquin ruled Rome, a local woman offered the Etruscan king 9 books. Now, these books were ignored at first, but upon its second glance, the beat-up manuscripts foretold the rise and fall of Rome. So, for most of its time, these spoiler-filled manuscripts were held in the Temple of Jupiter. So if anybody wants to do National Treasure 3, I have some ideas, just saying. We could do like 9 installments. Number 9, corrupt fire department. Oh, here we go. When we think back to ancient times, it's not long before we come across an ancient blaze or some ancient wild tragedy where you're like, oh my god, how did that even happen? Something that reminds you that it wasn't always a party, okay? It was rarely a party, in fact. When we think of Julius Caesar when regarding the leadership of Rome, we often forget Marcus Crassus. He was powerful and full of bright ideas on the sidelines. Marcus ran the fire brigade. A lot of open fires, a lot of accidents happening at this time, so of course we need responders. But back then, these officials arrived on site to this blazing emergency, but before helping out, Crassus would demand the owner sells their property to him first. Yeah, watch it burn or sell it for a not so handsome price. The choice is yours. And also you have 38 seconds to decide. TikTok. Number 8, ancient drag. I'll respect a girl's night out, okay? Always. I get it. My guy friends have ruined most nights out that I've had in the city. Because guys are dumbasses. That's a fact. Ancient Romans were ahead of the game with this one as well. That's why they made the festival of the good goddess women only. Yeah, statues of men weren't even allowed to partake. Statues depicting men at this festival had to be draped. Yeah, none of us were seeing anything. But then in comes Mr. Jealous, Mr. Ancient FOMO himself. Enter Publius Clodius Pulcher, okay? This man disguised himself as a flute lady, but when he didn't play the flute, and also wasn't a lady, and also nobody knew him, it was a little obvious that an intruder was present. A trial soon followed and the festival was then suspended. See, guys ruin the party. Even in ancient Roman days, this dude's like, nah, I'm gonna go ruin it.
Number 7, Brooklyn Bridge bootleggers. Should have been a pro hockey team, the Brooklyn Bootleggers. John Roebling designed the Brooklyn Bridge, which opened in 1883. Apparently, he was able to fund the design and construction with the help of liquor vendors. Okay, I can see where this is heading. Since the anchorages of the bridges and the voids between them and the walls were neither intensely hot or freezing cold, so storing alcohol in them made sense. So Roebling rented out the caverns below the entrances to various alcohol vendors in the late 19th century. Alright, right around the time where they're like, should we make this stuff illegal? The bridge itself was built with tons of passages and compartments under it. They were actually rented out for storage, businesses, and apartments. In order to fund the $15 million to finish the bridge, elites paid up to $5 grand a year to store and cool their hooch there. Imagine during the Prohibition time too? Pretty pricey and sneaky stuff if you ask me. Number 6, Trafalgar Square Bobbies. If you're familiar with the London area, you've probably seen this. This little post office lamppost looking thing. It's actually a fully functioning police station. One of the world's smallest, actually. According to historians, it was built in 1926 so that police could be close to the protests in the busy square. Basically the first CCTV, I guess. At the end of World War I, a temporary police box outside of the Trafalgar Square station needed to be renovated, and instead, it was decided to build a less obvious, more subtle station. Something a little invisible to criminals. So they built one inside a lamppost. It was the first to actually have a mirrored interior bood light. When we went from candles to those flamethrower lights in the UK, it had a direct phone line to Scotland Yard and all. And when the phone rang, the mirrors on top spun, just like the sirens we all see on emergency vehicles today. Like a mini bat symbol almost. It's so small too. It's now used for, of course, brooms and mops. Can you imagine? Yeah, you're under arrest. Just close the door behind you, please. Thank you. Just turn around. Turn around! Number 5. St. Mark's Crypt. Beneath the presbytery and deep inside the chapel sits a crypt, one that for centuries has been the home of St. Mark himself. St. Mark's Basilica in Venice, one of the most visited churches in the world. Every day, thousands of tourists visit to admire the mosaics and marble it houses inside. A true masterpiece and celebration of art and culture. And old. In 1063, the construction of an ageless crypt to hold the remains of the evangelist Mark. The ruins of previous buildings were transformed into a single crypt in which the new basilica would be built over top. When the body of St. Mark was found, it was placed with full honors inside this crypt and built over. In 1563, the Brotherhood moved inside the church, and in 1604, the crypt was officially sealed and closed forever. Dude, I've seen the Crypt Keeper, alright? I'm not going down there. No way, dude. Are you serious? Like 1,000-year-old bones? Number 4. Club 33. I know what you're thinking. Hey Kyle, where's this rager of a nightclub located? Well, it's a little complicated. You see, it's above the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. For real. You see, we're really getting into some secretive stuff now. Club 33 is the official Disneyland members only lounge for dining and drinking. And I'm not talking like a fast pass for rides or anything. Not even the elites had memberships. It's hidden within an attraction next to Walt Disney's actual apartment. The entrance of the club was at 33 Royal Street, hence the address plate with just the number 33 on it. People never even notice the club because even if they do, the chances of being invited behind that door, it's next to slim. After Disney's death, the demand was lifted and those willing to pay a small $50,000 initiation fee and of course $15,000 annually per person are implored to visit. All that to drink like a gin and tonic out of Chip from Beauty and the Beast? Yeah, I'll pass.
Number 3, Roman shampoo. Okay, when my hair grew out over the pandemic, I had a panic attack. I don't know what the f to do. I had a huge wake-up call. I've never had long hair before. I didn't know what to use in this mop. I still don't. Clearly, evidently, all I had growing up was the classic 4-in-1 shampoo for guys. That wasn't working out at all. That sucked. I needed some curl cream, okay? Separate jars of items, not just a 5-in-1 with mouthwash on your head. Those aren't good. Those don't do anyone any good. But the ancient Romans, they didn't have Head and Shoulders back then. What did they do? Well, sometimes nothing. They would dip their hair in cold water, and at public bathhouses also, very public, then they would rub and scrape away oils. Lime water was also used to wash your hair, but that was just as useful as lime wire. Sometimes Europeans wouldn't even use water at all to clean their head. They would rub their head with bran, like just a loose bran, before bed, and then they'd brush it out with a comb in the morning. Yeah, bran. I used dog shampoo once by accident. I thought that was bad. Bran? Be so itchy, I wouldn't sleep a wink. Number 2. Ancient socks. Somebody got me socks over the holidays as a gift, and let me tell you, last year, I became a man. I was like, thank you, I actually love this. This is now the best gift of my life. Socks and lip balm, that's it. I don't want a PlayStation, get lost. Socks in ancient Greece, first of all, they weren't, the ankle socks. There weren't Vans skateboarding socks. There weren't the weird grippy ones that kids have. Where were those growing up, first of all? Not even close. Socks came around in the 8th century BC, and it was made fresh from animal hairs. This led to Romans tying animal skins around their feet, and then, tying it more and more and more and higher. Anything to keep it there. Now cut to the 2nd century AD in ancient Rome, the sock game finally got real. Romans began using fabrics instead of animal skins. It was now softer, it was lighter, and then later in the 5th century, socks were worn only by the most holy, which is kind of ironic because socks have holes in them. You get the joke, there it is. Socks were associated with the church. They were considered a symbol of purity. Socks would go all the way up your leg back then. Like I said, a little different than the New Balance ankle socks we got today. A little less holy. Finally, number 1, public bathhouse. This last one, okay, we haven't moved on from this at all. That's why I wanted to finish this list. Nice little fresh, fun reminder from Taylor McWaters. Here we go. We still bathe together, a lot. We go to water parks and we swim around in pools filled with pee. Ancient Roman bathhouses were the older, slightly yuckier versions of water parks. They would literally spread intestinal parasites. They were actually way worse. In these massive rooms with giant pools just lie disease. Nude, there were and everyone was sweaty and it was all tight and there was no filtration system. It was like an indoor hot tub without the pumps or the salts. It was gross. The Romans were literally figuring out sewage systems at the same time, which I of course mentioned earlier, but they were also the first to create heated public baths. Yeah, my above ground pool wasn't heated, but the ancient Romans, they had heated pools. Great, I gotta send an email to my dad this afternoon. Now I'm pissed. The Archaeology and Anthropology department at Cambridge discovered that Romans brought lots of parasites to Europe. Yeah, the fossilized feces showed that these heated, relaxing, rejuvenating bathhouses nearby were all but. Yeah, they were horrible. They were just spreading hot disease, coming in hot. I don't mean to undermine the ancient Romans. To be fair, they also brought with them lice and fleas. Ayo, this one for the road.